During the first quarter of this year, Malta's GDP grew by 5.3%. This was the sixth quarter in a row when our economy expanded by more than 5 percentage points. During this period, we have consistently had the second largest economic growth across the European Union. When my administration took power, there was no indication that any of this would happen. I clearly remember the title of the first economic forecast the European Commission made for Malta after the change in administration. It was, and it read, "Malta, subdued investment holds back growth." GDP growth was at the time forecast to be in the coming years less than 2%. Unemployment was assumed to remain above 6%. Our balance of payments position vis-à-vis other countries was forecast to be 0%. According to the Commission, our national debt would by now exceed 75% of GDP, as our fiscal deficit would remain consistently above 3%, nearly touching 4% of GDP. In fact, our country had just been placed yet again under the strictures of an excessive deficit procedure. Instead of a constant fiscal deficit, always well above 3%, the Commission's economists are now expecting us to have a deficit of less than 1% of our GDP, with national debt falling to less than the Maastricht benchmark of 60% next year. To have such a low burden of national debt for Malta, one would need to go back to 1998. Why are these economic results important? What do they really mean for the Maltese population? I can summarize this in one very important word: jobs. Fast economic growth has led to the largest increase in employment in our history. So much so that for the first time, we are now creating jobs not just for our citizens, but also for thousands of persons from other countries. For 3 years in a row, we have had the highest increase in employment amongst all European Union member states. And this year, the Commission forecasts that it will happen once again. Whereas in the 5 years of the previous administration, every 2 days, one additional person ended up on the dole, we have the third lowest unemployment rate in the European Union, with a 0.1% point difference from Germany. On my first day as Prime Minister, the gap between us and Germany stood at more than 1 percentage point. For thousands of our youth, the active labour market policies that have been introduced, such as the Youth Guarantee, have meant the difference between remaining on the dole and participating more fully in our society. For thousands of people previously on benefits, the social security reforms we introduced, such as the tapering of benefits, have meant the same. For thousands of women with young children, the introduction of universal free childcare has acted in the same way. With a stronger economy, we have empowered thousands of families to make a change for the better. In last year's budget, we also started to implement our vision for Malta's pension system. This after we evaluated the recommendations of the Pensions Strategy Group that we had set up early on during this administration. The work of this group has been welcomed by both local stakeholders and also by foreign experts, like the European Commission and the IMF. Testament to this is the fact that for the first time since their introduction, this year's European Commission's assessment for the country has struck off its country-specific recommendation on pensions for Malta, and this is a first. Does this mean that we have finished our work here? Of course not. But knowing that experts trust you and trust that you are heading in the right direction is the first step towards success. The first principle is that there needs to be a clear definition of the objectives of the Maltese pension system, and in particular, that we need to define the exact nature of the poverty alleviation function of our system. In this slide, in last year's budget, we implemented the first real increase in pensions in a generation by defining a new minimum pension for existing pensioners. This increase, which will be the first of many, meant that 12,000 of our most vulnerable pensioners received a real increase in their pension. At the same time, we improved the widow's pension so that those who receive a pension in their own right before the decease of their partner no longer lose 1/6 of their partner's pension. Does this mean that we stop now? No. This is again a first step. We will continue to improve our state pensions so that they raise as many out of poverty as we can. The second principle in our pensions policy is that an adequate and sustainable pension system needs a strong, active employment policy. I have already spoken about our success in raising female participation, reducing unemployment, and providing incentives for those on benefits to instead join the workforce. We need to make sure people improve their employability. We want our workers, particularly those who have just joined the labor market and the labor supply, to work up to wage distribution. Our focus will now turn on training, on providing incentives for increasing one's employability, and on up skills.